Hello and welcome back to the LFC Transfer Room. Today we have an opposition preview for the Champions League final for the Liverpool vs Real Madrid. Today I'm joined by Kiyan. How are you, Kiyan?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and obviously yourself, you're a Real Madrid fan. You cover Real Madrid yourself. And where can everybody find you before we start this interview?
Yeah, so we run a pretty large Real Madrid podcast. It's called the Managing Madrid podcast. You can Google it, get it on your podcast app, whatever. We're also on YouTube, and we also actually just put out a huge video preview of the Champions League finals. If anyone's interested in that, it's called The School of Real Madrid. You can search it on YouTube, so you can find us pretty much. Those are the best places you can find our work.
Perfect. And all of that stuff will be in the description if you want to check out any stuff on their podcast ahead of the Champions League final. But obviously, the biggest game of the season is on Saturday, Liverpool versus Real Madrid in the Champions League final. It is a redo of the 28 final, which a lot of Liverpool fans like to forget after a Karius disaster class. But going into this season of the Champions League, we've seen Real Madrid in all of their Champions League games. They've been very open defensively, playing very end-to-end football. You know, the comebacks against PSG, Manchester City and Chelsea. Do you expect them to do the same against Liverpool? Obviously, this isn't a knockout game. It's whoever wins this match wins the competition. So there's not really any room for error like there was in the other games, is there?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's 90 minutes. It's not two legs where you can make adjustments and have time to make comebacks and stuff. If I had to guess, I think you'd have less defensive holes in this Real Madrid team in the final. I think they'll be a little bit more conservative. If you look back to those Manchester City games, the first leg we were very open defensively. One of the worst defensive performances you can put, and that's not a good sign against Manchester City of all teams. If you play that way, you're going to get toasted. And luckily, we scored 3 goals and we only came away with a 1-goal deficit. In the second leg, we were much more conservative. We played deeper. We plugged defensive holes. It sacrificed our offense a little bit, but in the long term, it worked. If I had to guess, I think you're going to see, and maybe to put it, something your fans could relate to, I think you're going to see something similar to what Tottenham played against you guys recently, where they were pretty deep, they were compact, they relied on Son and Kane in transition, much like we will do with Benzema and Vinicius. I think you'll see more of what the Real Madrid version of the second leg against Manchester City and not the one that you saw in the first leg. So if I had to guess, I think it's going to be a little bit more defensively compact than in previous games.
Yeah, I mean, you guys seem to have your starting lineup similar to Liverpool. You know, I think there's only a couple of injuries. I know Hazard's coming back, Bale might be out, and Marcelo is potentially out too. But do you expect him to change his team, or do you think he's going to go with his strongest lineup that he can?
No, I mean, I think the lineup picks itself. It's picked itself pretty much for the past month or two. I mean, the one position we've always had variability has been the right wing. But I think Ancelotti has found the formula throughout this Champions League run. He puts Fede Valverde out there, who is kind of a pseudo right winger, but not really. He's a central midfielder turned right winger. He can carry the ball up the field. He can defend really well, which is key against Robertson and Salah. And Mane, obviously, I combined the Mane and Salah names by accident. Mane and Robertson on that wing, you'll have Fede and Carvajal facing them. And so what he does is he starts Fede Valverde and then brings in Rodrigo off the bench in the second half. So the starting lineup picks itself, and I guess for the sake of your listeners, it'll be Courtois. The back line will be Carvajal, Militao, Alaba, who is back from injury now. He's training with the team. That's kind of a new thing since yesterday. Then you have Ferland Mendy on the left, and then in midfield you have Casemiro, Modric, Kroos, and Fede Valverde, and you have Vinicius on the left wing, Benzema up top. And that's what Ancelotti will likely go with.
Yeah, and on Liverpool side, we've unfortunately at the worst time in the season been hit with a couple of major injuries. Virgil van Dijk had to sit out the final 2 Premier League games, but he will be back. The 2 main ones are our midfield, or 2 guaranteed nailed-on starters for the whole season, Thiago and Fabinho. Fabinho has just come out and said that he's hoping to be fit, and Klopp also confirmed that Thiago has a chance to play. You know, how big is that going to be for Real Madrid? Because we know how how good and dominant your midfield are, especially with Casemiro, Modric, Kris. It's arguably been one of the best midfielders for the past 5-6 years in the world, and it never seems to drop. And we were on the receiving end last season of that midfield, and it absolutely dominated us. But we didn't have at that time Thiago and Fabinho at the full strength. So, how big do you think the midfield battle is going to be tomorrow? Or Saturday?
So a couple things. I think it's not the dominant midfield it used to be. Modric, Casemiro, Kris in 2016-17 was a completely different midfield than what it is now. It doesn't really pin opponents. It doesn't hold possession nearly as well, but it's experienced, and they have their leaders at this stage of their careers. I wouldn't expect them to necessarily win the midfield battle. What I would hope and expect for them to do is that Liverpool are such a great pressing team, obviously. What I would want to see from Casemiro, Kris, and Modric specifically is that our first one or two passes out of the back facing Liverpool's press are going to be key. So they need to make sure that their passing and composure in those situations is on point. I think Liverpool will likely have more of the ball, and they'll dominate the ball more so than Real Madrid will. I think there'll be phases where Real Madrid may have more control, and that'll likely be in the second half when we start bringing off, players like Camavinga and Ceballos and Rodrigo off the bench. And I think we typically have more control when they come on. But Casemiro, Kris, Modric at this point in their career, they're not gonna hold the ball much. They're going to just plug defensive lines, and they're going to try to get the ball up the field as quickly as possible to Vinicius and Benzema. So I actually think, while that's a key matchup, the biggest matchups will probably be on the wings, where, obviously our fullbacks, Vinicius on the left versus Salah and Trent. We have Ferland Mendy defending on that side as well. I think that may actually be where the key matchups are. But I also think the midfield is I'd expect Liverpool to have more of the ball, and for Real Madrid to just kind of sling back on the counter if they can.
Yeah, and obviously going back to the last time you played you guys in the Champions League, I think it was the round of 16 last season, or quarterfinals. At the time we had no Virgil van Dijk, no Joel Matip, no Joe Gomez. Canate hadn't joined. If I remember correctly, I think we might have played Ozan Kabak and Nat Phillips or Fabinho there. Obviously, it's a different proposition for the Real Madrid attackers now. Virgil van Dijk has come back to his best. It'll most likely be Ibrahima Konate, arguably two of the fastest centre-backs or even players in world football. How do you think Real Madrid, especially with the pace of Vinicius and the holder player Benzema, can hurt this centre-back pairing? Because it seems like what we've seen when they're at the top of the game, they're the perfect all-round centre-backs, Konate and Van Dijk.
Yeah, it's a great question. We have the same questions. I think, given the fact that Benzema and Vinicius have been two of the best players in the world this year, that's really where we're banking our players to really come good and take advantage of the space behind Trent. I would say, I think one thing that your center backs will be pretty comfortable with is just any aerial duels. It's been our weak point this season. Ever since we lost Ramos and Varane, we haven't been strong in the air defensively or offensively. So I'd imagine Van Dijk and whoever his center back partner will be will feast in the air. And that's something that worries Real Madrid fans. But in terms of Benzema and Vinicius, really, if Vinicius can get behind Trent and do it multiple occasions and drag Van Dijk to that side and free up space for Benzema, I think we have a pretty good chance of scoring 1 or 2 goals in this game. And if they can't, then that's going to be very difficult. So Benzema's a type of striker as well that moves constantly. He's not a stationary guy. He plays in midfield. He goes on both wings. And so I don't know if there's going to be one center back marking him in particular. And I think that's probably what makes him also so dangerous. So if, because his movement is so unpredictable that, it's hard to track. So I would expect you'd see a lot of that. And basically the way we score goals in transition is we get the ball out wide to one of the wingers, usually Vinicius, and he does some magic. He does some weird sorcery stuff. He beats his man, and then Benzema makes an off-ball run, and he gets the ball to Benzema in the box, and a shot or a goal is created. So that's what I think you would, I guess, worry about if you were a Liverpool fan.
Yeah, I mean, it's You mentioned before Liverpool's high pressing. We've had 6 days to rest for this. Doesn't sound like a lot, but we've been playing pretty much every 3 days now for coming up to 6 months. So how do you think Real Madrid are gonna cope with that pressing? Obviously, it's the midfield is starting to age now. It's even though you've got Fede Valverde dropping in, the fact we've got Luis Diaz and he's a different monster when it comes to pressing. So how do you think Ancelotti is gonna approach that from Liverpool? Because we will press no matter what. It's gonna be straight out of the gates at least for the first 45 minutes.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, 2018 in the final, I have very, very rough memories of seeing Liverpool's press being super aggressive. We all had questions, right? Of like, Liverpool, one of the best pressing teams in the world. Will they be aggressive to start in the final? Will they be more conservative? And it turns out they were super aggressive. Now, we were a better, more press-resistant team then than we are now. And so that, to answer your question, it really worries me. It really worries all of us. And the way we've knocked out of the Champions League in the last 3 years leading up before this has all been against high-pressing teams. Ajax, Chelsea, Manchester City. All these teams were pressing us aggressively. We couldn't cope. We were giving the ball away constantly. Even that 2018 final, we were doing the same. We were giving the ball away. If you go back and watch that film, but we were able to kind of recover and weather the storm and grow into it a little bit more as the game wore on. But it worries me a lot. And the one I worry about most is Casemiro. He's been a liability on the ball when under pressure. Militao is another one who can make mistakes. So our ability to deal with Liverpool's press is going to be key either way. And if we do it well, I think we're going to get the ball to Vinicius. If we don't, it's going to be trouble for us.
Yeah, a lot of reporters in Spain as well seem to be, they've been getting on the luck side of things. Obviously, the Champions League it's luck based. I think both of us would admit that we're two of the most, highly decorated teams in Europe. You have to have a bit of luck in the Champions League. But do you think it's as simple as that? Especially in the final, you saw in the 2018, we got a bit of luck there. So do you think luck will play a part in this, or do you think the best team wins?
No champion has ever not had luck in the history of any sports. There is always some luck along the way. And I think with the Karius thing, obviously we got lucky, and there was reports he had a concussion after, and obviously that was something that we can't tactically plan for. We didn't plan to take advantage of that, obviously. But I will say this. You put yourself in lucky positions to win. And Benzema did that to Karius that day, but Benzema's been doing that to goalkeepers in Europe in the biggest games his entire career. And he presses like crazy. And so if he doesn't press, you can't make those luck. I mean, you guys know better than anyone what pressing can bring you, right? So, to answer your question, I'm not sure, because Liverpool have that European DNA that Real Madrid do as well. They are able to overcome moments where their backs are against the wall. They can grow into the game, and when things aren't going their way, they can maybe get a lucky bounce as well. So I'd probably say like the answer to this is a combination of both. In a lot of ways, we kind of face the mirrored version of ourselves, because we don't, against Manchester City and PSG and Chelsea, these guys aren't like storied Champions League clubs. They have those mental barriers, but Liverpool don't have those mental barriers. So I think maybe our quote unquote luck will run out at this point, or maybe we'll come good. I actually think this is probably, Liverpool are the favorites, but I would say it's not like 70-30. It's probably like 55-45, something like that, or 60-40 maybe at best, because we have the experience as well. So I'd be curious, but I'm sure one of us will get a lucky bounce here and there, and the narrative will write itself.
Yeah, definitely. And finally, how we end off all of our opposition previews. I'm going to put you on the spot, and I'm going to ask you for a score prediction for the Champions League final.
Right, so this is where your listeners can definitely laugh at me at the end when this is all over, but I'm going to say 3-2 for Real Madrid.
Yeah, I'd opposite that for Liverpool. I think it's going to be a very open game. I think defence is going to be secondary. But we never know. But Kiyan, thank you for joining us. Tell the viewers where we can find you on all the social medias, and where your podcast is as well.
Yeah, you can search me on Twitter, Kiyan So, and then on Managing Madrid at Managing Madrid on Twitter, and same handles for all the socials. And look forward to seeing you there if you're looking for Liverpool coverage.
Yeah, definitely. That'll all be in the description. So if you did enjoy this video, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll have a lot more Real Madrid versus Liverpool coverage for you this week. So thank you very much for joining us.